Thank you for lunch. All of you who brought those marvelous things that we just eaten for lunch, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That almost makes a meeting worthwhile, hey? To get to eat together. This is good. I'm going to kind of try to run things, and I'm going to try and run things so that we are out of here in an hour. But the first thing I want to do is introduce Chris Mapoy, who has come up from Calgary area. Chris is a staff person for the Chinook Winds region, and his portfolio is both first third ministry, which is children, youth, adults, people in the first third of life, and also justice ministries. Part of what he's been doing of late is working with the referendum questions and what's going on, and working with Calgary Alliance for the Common Good and other groups to kind of sort these things out for us. So he'll be our resource for what's going on and kind of some expert advice or whatever. But anyway, thank you, Chris, for hauling out for this. It's great having Chris on staff in both of those areas. He's a real asset to the region. Thank you. So here's what we propose to do. And thanks to the folks who have kind of been helping direct me on this. What we decided was that we couldn't really have good conversations about whether it is wise for us to vote yes or no on these questions, or what religious values apply to these questions if we don't really understand what the questions are. So the first task is to be clear about the questions and the implications of a yes or no vote. So that's what we're going to restrict ourselves to in this gathering. So I'm going to head off any discussion about the merits of voting yes or no. All we want to talk about is the implications of voting yes or no. What does it mean to vote yes or no on these questions? Is that fair enough? So we will hopefully have the merit discussion later. Did you get a copy of the printed out stuff? Has everybody got a way to see one of these things? If you can share them around, because we couldn't get the slides to work, so we're going to be analog here this afternoon rather. I'll read stuff out as well, so that we'll have it verbally, but it'll be useful to be able to see it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this. We've tried to basically outline what the implications of a yes or no vote is on each question. And we're just going to go through, read what's here, and then ask you, is it fair? Did we get it right? Does anybody have any further comments on what the implications of this particular question might be? And Bryant will be carting around a microphone. Thank you, Bryant. To anyone who wants to make a comment. And then we're going to ask, is there anything else you need to learn or know before you can make a good decision on this question? For instance, one of the questions has to do with abolition of the Senate. And if you don't know what the Senate does, you may need to learn that before you can vote on that. But whatever for each question. And then if there's time at the very end, we'll spend a little bit of time, and this is one place that Chris may be able to help, because he's got a sense of what a number of congregations in our region are doing. At the end, if we got time, we'll talk about what's our strategy as a congregation. What are we going to do as a congregation with this referendum? Is that fair enough? You okay? You in? Okay. So, here we go. So we'll start with the 9 questions, and we'll leave the separation question to the end. The first ones are the non-constitutional questions. And here is the first one. do you support the government of Alberta taking increased control over immigration for the purposes of decreasing immigration to more sustainable levels, prioritizing economic migration, and giving Albertans first priority on new employment opportunities? Okay, the yes implications. This asks the government of Alberta to take increased control over an area of federal jurisdiction, immigration. So this either would mean that Alberta would have to separate immigration to Alberta from immigration to the rest of Canada, which is unconstitutional and requires constitutional change and it's almost impossible, or it would add a layer of governmental bureaucracy to immigrants to Alberta. You'd have to go through 2 stages of immigration to come to Alberta. Presumably, it would also require employers to demonstrate before hiring immigrants or residents of another province that they were unable to hire Albertans. So, for instance, if we were advertising for a minister, we would have to first open that to Albertans, and only then, if that didn't work, open the position to a wider group. Okay, do we get that one right? Is that? Oh, I'm sorry. And a no vote means that things stay as they are, with immigration as a federal responsibility and jurisdiction. Okay, did we get that right? Any comments? Any other implications that people want to note? Anything that a yes or no? Is the question clear enough to you? Do you have a sense you know what it is? I see a hand back there with Will. Hang on for the mic, Will. Sorry.
The one thing about provinces and immigration is that provinces have a way now to sort of do this. It's called the Provincial Nominee Program. So Alberta's is called the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, which has a bunch of different streams to meet market needs of immigration, like where we need more workers. So something that I don't understand about this question is we already have a way to prioritize economic migration, because that's what that nomination program is economic migration into Alberta. We need more people in hospitality, so we have this entry path for those people. So I'm not sure how this would change what exists already, but there is a way now to do this thing. So that's just another kind of misinformation thing that people can use now. There is a way now to do this that Alberta does and has done for a while.
Thank you. It's also that there's also a note that the purpose of this is to decrease immigration. Currently, the population of Canada is dropping because immigration has already been decreased through most of Canada. So, Bob.
I'm not sure, but it sounds to me like if a farmer in Acadia Valley or Oyen, which is down near Medicine Hat, was hiring somebody from Saskatchewan to work on their farm, they would have to prove to the government of Alberta there wasn't someone in Grand Prairie that couldn't do the job.
That's what I understand. If we have to give priority to Albertans in hiring, that would be the case, yes. Somehow. It's not clear how, but... Okay, sorry, I can't... Are we clear on this one? Anything we need to learn in order to make a choice on this? I've got Bruce with a hand up there.
Under the immigration of refugees and people coming into Canada, they changed that process back in the early 2000s from having, it used to be the churches often had a role to play What they actually did is they turned it over to the communities of immigrants themselves so that they could nominate and bring the people, their families, family reunification, and it changed the whole way that immigrants came to this country. Because all like the Muslim Association, the people from the people that came from Sudan, they had the Sudanese refugee committee. They built their own to care for the people that they would bring from the other country, and they looked after them. They raised the money. They did what the churches used to do. But those communities themselves were given the opportunity to support the people that they were bringing in. And it fundamentally changed the way people got into Canada. They came to be reunited in a community that they knew.
Yeah, I think the churches still are in that position, but there are more others that also are. Yeah, I think, yeah. Okay for this one? One more.
I think one of the unclear parts is refugee versus immigrant, and that's another way to muddy the waters.
We may come up against that in some of the other questions. Yeah. Okay, good to go? The second question. Do you support the government of Alberta introducing a law mandating that only Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and individuals with an Alberta-approved immigration status will be eligible for provincially funded programs such as healthcare, education, and other social services? So a yes vote again requires that Alberta maintain an additional layer of bureaucracy around immigration, Alberta-approved immigration. That means that some legal immigrants, temporary foreign workers, possibly foreign students, would not be able to see a doctor outside of an emergency room, send their children to school, or access social services. And a no vote would say conditions remain as they are, where all legal immigrants are able to access medical, educational, and social services. Okay, are we clear on that one? Anyone want to make any comments about, do we get it fair? Bob.
Luckily, all the ministers are sitting together.
I just have a question. If we know how much cost is being incurred right now by the people they want to exclude in the future, they're saying, well, we're going to make a great saving. What cost is actually there is? How often do people who are undocumented or whatever end up seeing doctors and us paying for them? What percentage of the total healthcare cost is that?
The figures that I have seen, these come from the Calgary Alliance for the Common Good, and some of them are taken because it's tough to get these statistics. But the one that I believe Danielle Smith herself used was, she talked about a cost of $1.6 billion that is basically the immigrant cost to the system. And Calgary Alliance estimates that the immigrant tax is about $5 to $6 billion. So what it looks like is the people that are in question here are using actually less of the services than they are paying for, which in some ways stands to reason, because a lot of the folks that we're talking about are either students or temporary workers, and they tend to be young and healthy. So, but it's tough to come by those statistics reliably, and I'm not sure. I don't know if you've got any better handle on that one, Chris. But that's what I remember from the Alliance discussions. Well, one of the other kind of implications that I think some of us have talked about is if you bar people's children from school, and if you bar people from accessing medical care, then the only place they can get medical care is an emergency room. So you're actually increasing the pressure on an emergency room and creating a number of other social issues by keeping kids out of school. So you're actually increasing the pressure rather than decreasing it. So I see Tilly at the back.
Since I immigrated to this country twice, this is of deep concern, every word. And if you read there, Alberta approved immigration. And this is the second question. Do we have an Alberta approved immigration already? So this does not seem to be, you can't really answer this question because we didn't do the first one yet.
There is, yeah, I think the assumption is that there would be an extra layer to immigration to Alberta, that an extra approved, I don't think there is, other than what Will talked about, I don't think there is any Alberta designation that is separate from the national. Okay, anything you need to learn about this other than what that Alberta approved status might mean?
How much is this going to cost us as taxpayers to have to form a new form of government to look after all of Alberta immigration? What's the estimate of that cost?
What's the estimate of a cost for this extra layer of governmental bureaucracy? And I don't believe anyone has suggested anything.
My second question is, if we don't allow immigrant children to go to school, how many teachers are going to be unemployed? Because there's classrooms in cities that are primarily immigrant children. So what level of unemployment are we going to create by not offering these services?
Uncertain. But yep, thank you.
Sorry, I forgot to ask that.
Bruce?
What is the value of the immigrant to us? You know, like we hear that we have 70,000 jobs that have to be fulfilled in the next few years. So I just wonder what value overall does immigration give us as a province? You know, so if you want these immigrants to come, you want to be able to, I'm sure they want to have a guarantee health care and schooling for the children and things like that. So just as in order to draw them in if we need them.
Yeah, the question is what is the value of immigration and immigrants to the Alberta society, and what is the implication of these kind of questions on how hospitable we are to immigrants? Did I get that right? And I think that is an important thing to consider, especially then as we go the next step and consider the merits of yes or no to this. Thank you. Yep. Anything else? Oh, there's one hand up here. I can't see whose hand it is.
I think a lot of immigrants who come here are eager to work, and here they have the possibility to work. in a lot of the country where we come from, they have a whole process to go, are not allowed to work. And most immigrants, which country they come, doesn't matter, are eager to work. They want to build up a future for themselves, for their children. They are so thankful that their children can go to school. So I think in a country where are a lot of jobs, maybe the housing is a little bit a problem, but otherwise they are from great value in the country, and kids learn about from children from other countries how life is there, and so I think because they can find jobs here right away, they are a big value for the country. Sometimes they do the jobs we don't want to do. We have to realize that too.
Yep, thank you. And in particular, the folks that are the temporary immigrants are usually here because of a job. They can't come without it, or because they are students and they can't come without being students.
One of the other things, because Alberta wants to approve the immigration, we have to look at people from Canada, and I'll use the Newfoundland term, Canada, as immigrants as well, because they're saying they're going to have to prove that that job can't be filled by an existing person here.
Right, yeah, for the first question. Okay, to move on to the third? Okay, number 3. Assuming that all Canadian citizens and permanent residents continue to qualify for social support programs as they do now, do you support the Government of Alberta introducing a law requiring all individuals with a non-permanent legal immigration status to reside in Alberta for at least 12 months before qualifying for any provincially funded social support programs? So a yes vote to that would mean that non-permanent foreign workers, that would be people working on farms, hospitality work in the parks, for instance, would not have access to social programs for the first year of their residence and employment. And a no vote, non-permanent workers would have the same access to social programs as other taxpayers. Any questions on this? Did we get it right? Any comments? There's someone, I see a hand back in the back. Again, I can't see quite whose hand it is.
And just to clarify, they are temporary foreign workers are also paying taxes on their earnings. So that's why it's the same as other taxpayers.
Yeah, if you're working here, you're paying taxes here. Okay, anything you need to know in order to, like anything that we want to learn about in this one? Sorry, what, Jan?
In 1995, I went to South Korea, group of women ministers hosted by Presbyterian women ministers. Many churches we visited were housing foreign workers in their church basements because they'd come from Bangladesh, from Nepal, et cetera, et cetera. Then they get hurt at work. Their first priority was to send money home. Their home people are wondering what the heck happened. And it was just crazy how busy and faithful the church people were in trying to fix this predicament that they'd come up against by wanting to give these people the work, but then ended up that they had no coverage for getting hurt on the workplace and things like that. We saw people maimed, there was no other word for it, that were being housed in their churches and cared for by the church people because the government wasn't doing it, and certainly their home countries weren't doing it.
Yeah, and temporary foreign workers can be vulnerable. Okay, Okay to move to the next one? Okay, fourth question. Assuming that all Canadian citizens and permanent residents continue to qualify for public health care and education as they do now, do you support the Government of Alberta charging a reasonable fee or premium to individuals with a non-permanent immigration status living in Alberta for their and their families' use of the healthcare and education systems? So a yes vote for this one means that non-permanent residents of Alberta will be charged an additional fee to access health care and education services, school for the kids, be able to see a doctor. A no vote means that non-permanent residents continue to receive the same access to health and education services as other taxpayers.
And I'll start off the comment, because I have the mic, of course. And this would be in addition to the tax burden that they already pay in any fees, like the federal and provincial taxes. So this would be like back 15 years ago when we were paying health fees ourselves. It'd be a reintroduction of the health fees.
Yeah, a reintroduction of the health fees for some taxpayers and not others. Yep, implications clear? Do we get it right? And if we didn't get it right, please feel free to speak up if we're not being fair.
Wendy?
Oh, okay.
So we keep talking about the fact that these people are paying taxes. And when I talk to people that are in favor of some of these proposals, what I'm getting back is there's immigrants that are coming here, they are not working, and they are just taking advantage. Do we have any statistics on the immigrants that are here, the percentage that are actively working or those who are not working? Do we have any information on that? Because I would like to be able to rebut these comments that I get made to me.
I don't know, Chris, if you've got any. I do not. Maybe Chris has got something to give us on this.
Thank you for the question on being able to kind of think about this in a way that can rebut it using stats. The short answer is that I also don't have the stats, but I appreciate the feedback, and that'll inform how I'll have these conversations in the future. While I don't have specific information from government vital statistics, I know because university professors at Mount Royal and U of C and MRU that study these things would say that there is no evidence that there's widespread fraud in accessing social services in the province. There doesn't seem to be any evidence to suggest that that is the case. And the only other thing that I wanted to add is the last two questions, the thing that stood out for me as Dave was talking, and I hadn't noticed before, is that both of those questions are prefaced with assuming that all Canadian citizens and permanent residents continue to qualify, etc., which I thought was interesting. Is the government anticipating a change for Canadian citizens and permanent residents also coming to social services? I think that as a person who prides themselves in learning from history, that you sort of target or punch down to one group and then another group follows. So it strikes me as curious that both of those questions give you an assumption that everyone will continue to qualify for services as normal. So I don't know what to make of that.
As a church guy, I have been involved with some folks in poverty and some folks who are dealing with the social services systems. And I have not experienced a lot of fraud in that. Sorry?
Barriers.
Lots of barriers, but very little fraud. And I don't experience the social service systems being accessed unduly by immigrants. In fact, most of my experience is of Canadians accessing the system. The one place where I have experienced immigrants not working and being subject to or being recipients of care is when a church sponsors a refugee. And people are coming not because they qualify for the kind of economic immigration point system that we have, but because they need refuge. And in those cases, often people don't speak the language, are coming out of traumatic experience and have a lot of issues and needs. And that is why there is a sponsoring body and why the federal government provides for those people for the first year plus when people come. So it's like the cases where people are immigrants. That's the reason we have brought them here, is for refuge and for healing, and so and that's usually covered by the federal government.
Would you be able to get us stats on that, Chris? Yes. Okay, so you'll get it to the church. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that question.
Just a reflection on that assumption that all Canadian citizens and permanent residents continue to qualify, we might consider what the Alberta government is doing to people on AISH right now.
Right. Thanks. Next question. Okay. The last question, the last non-constitutional question. Do you support the government of Alberta introducing a law requiring individuals to provide proof of citizenship, such as a passport, birth certificate, or citizenship card, to vote in an Alberta provincial election? So a yes vote means that in order to vote, all of us must present formal citizenship identification. And a no vote means that current practice continues, in which voters, particularly the voters on the voters list, simply need to present simple ID or make a formal legal declaration. The implication of this that I have heard is that only certain people have that formal citizenship identification. If you're very poor, you don't have the $100, $150, whatever it is, dollars to get a passport, for instance, or to get the formal ID. So it is actually, this is a fairly established way to limit people from voting, particularly people who are poor.
And this would include the changes to the driver's license that show that you're a Canadian citizen by putting the flag there, because you have to prove that you are Canadian by presenting your citizenship card, passport, or some other legal document saying you're Canadian. Bob's first, because I'm lazy.
Is a birth certificate sufficient?
Yes.
It says it is. It says it is. It says a birth certificate is sufficient.
Whoa.
The assumption here is that there's electoral fraud, and that's certainly not the case.
Right. It's a question of, it appears that this is a solution in search of a problem that isn't.
Will just made a really good point about the bureaucracy involved in changing it such that that level of proof of citizenship would be required for each person, and as you say, how that would affect then people's ability to vote. Sorry, Will just made the point that there's a whole bureaucracy to having to change things from the way they are now to that process, that would be bureaucratically expensive and require more expense in staffing.
She doesn't care about expense.
Speaking as a bureaucrat, I really don't like you saying that we're expensive.
Next question. Okay, we're on to the constitutional questions now. And it's important to consider at the outset, I think, that all of these questions are outside of the constitutional jurisdiction of the provinces. So all of these are requesting changes to the Constitution of Canada, which is a process that requires negotiation and agreement from the federal government, all of the provinces, First Nations. It's a very difficult process. So just to say that at the outset, none of these things are under provincial jurisdiction. So first question, do you support the government of Alberta working with the governments of other willing provinces to amend the Canadian Constitution to have provincial governments and not the federal government select the justices appointed to provincial King's Bench and appeal courts? So a yes vote. We are asking the provincial government to undertake a campaign to change the Constitution so that appointments of judges to these courts would come under the sole control of the provincial government. And a no vote, the current process would remain, whereby judges are appointed by the federal government on the basis of recommendations made by an independent body, which includes representation from law societies and both federal and provincial governments. Okay, any questions? Did we get that accurate? Any questions? Anyone want to talk about any implications there? I got Will at the back.
Yes, sir. Just a couple things. Some background info that might be worth thinking about is that the Alberta government has had issues in the court system quite recently. You know, they've had a few different things with the justice system, and there might be an advantage to them being able to pick who is on part of those courts, or like who the judges are. For the Constitution Amendment itself, it's not necessarily all provinces. It'd have to be 7 out of 10 provinces that would have to agree to changing the Constitution. It has to add up to more than 50% of our population. So if we want to do any of these things, we need a bunch of other provinces to agree to do these things. And then it has to be provinces that have enough people in them as well to equal that number. And I don't think that most of these questions are questions that other provinces would care about or are also, you know, on our side about. So that's another thing. So it's called the 750, 7/50 is how they amend the Constitution.
Remembering the Maritimes have 4 provinces that would have to be included in this, and they're very small and very dependent upon fairness of, you know, money going from the more rich to the less poor or the less rich.
Okay, any other comments on this one? Anything you need to learn? Next question. Okay. Do you support the government of Alberta working with the governments of other willing provinces to amend the Canadian Constitution to abolish the unelected federal Senate? A yes vote. We are asking the government of Alberta to undertake a campaign to abolish the Senate and change the fundamental nature of our democratic system. And a no vote is the current system would remain. Okay, any comments on that one? Implications? On Bruce? So what is the current system? Is it what's and I'd have to, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what's the purpose of the Senate? We can find that out, but also who like I know there's a lot of patronage appointments, probably frustrating, but I don't understand, is there a process or why are they elected to the Senate? If
Okay, I can give you my like high school understanding, and it's a little bit adapted by having known a couple of senators. The Senate is an appointed body that has a more even representation by province rather than by population. The House of Commons is meant to represent ridings by population. So places with higher populations like Ontario, Quebec have much greater representation. The Senate is designed to even that out a bit so that regions are better represented in the Senate. The Senate is designed to be the house of sober second thought. So they are not elected so that they are not beholden to the political winds of the moment, as it were. And their job is to look at the legislation from the House of Commons and to give it a sober second look. Senators are appointed by the federal government, by the Prime Minister's offices, I think. And they are meant to be appointed from among prominent and respected Canadians. So they're meant to kind of carry some weight and wisdom, rather than simply being political appointments, which sometimes they turn out to be. I also, from having known a couple of senators, Lois Wilson, our first female moderator, was a senator. She was appointed to the Senate, and I think Romeo Dallaire was appointed to the Senate. Senators also will represent the Canadian government in a variety of places that maybe we don't want our elected House of Commons people to, we may, like Lois represented Canada because of her involvement with status of women issues and feminism and the church. She was able to represent the government of Canada in a number of those kind of places internationally, where an elected official, we might not want to take their time to do that. So the senators have a wider responsibility than simply the sober second thought on the legislation, but they are intended to be a body that is not elected and can kind of have a bit more weight of wisdom and reflection in terms of our legislation. So that's the purpose that I understand. Bob, you may want to.
And as I'm walking over there, and there are caveats to those rules, part of PEI being allowed into Confederation or joining up, even though they were bankrupt at the time, is they're guaranteed one senator and 3 members of parliament. And if one of those members of parliament is a member of the federal government, the majority, they also get to have a cabinet minister. So remembering that, there's a caveat to the Confederation.
I just recently went in, I read Murray Sinclair's Who We Are, and he was a senator in the latter part of his life, and he, in that book, reflects on his time as a senator, and I think it would be worth it for anybody who is wondering about senators and the way they think to read that bit.
That may be something we need to learn, is a little bit more about what the Senate does and what it's all about. So Jim, over at the side.
I know he can be heard around the world, but.
A little aside, if you'll allow me, 40 years ago, there was a very strong movement in Alberta in support of a proposition called the Triple E Senate. And the Triple E Senate was designed not to abolish the Senate, but to make the Senate effective, elected, and something else, some other E that I'd forgotten. One of the most prominent persons active in that association that led to a major plank in the Reform Party of Preston Manning when they got going was a person who was a resident of Lacombe. His wife, Mary Lou Rose, was the assistant principal at the high school for years. Alex Rose was a lawyer in town here, and the Roses were very prominent and long-term members of this congregation. And that went on for quite some years, and so it's been in the thinking of Albertans to some extent, one way or the other, for a long period of time now. An elected Senate.
Yeah, this one's abolishing, though. It's not reform.
Just to make a point that there's independent senators now. There are independent senators now. They're not necessarily have to be part of a caucus, the Liberal or the Conservative caucus. Trudeau instituted independent senators. So I think that was a progressive move so that they're not beholden to party policy.
Yeah, there always have been, I think, independent, but I think all of the Liberal senators walked out of caucus a few years ago. I'm not sure if they stayed out, but anyhow, next question. Okay. Do you support the Government of Alberta working with the governments of other willing provinces to amend the Canadian Constitution to allow provinces to opt out of federal programs that intrude on provincial jurisdiction, such as healthcare, education, and social services, without a province losing any of the associated federal funding for use in its social programs? So a yes vote to this one. We are asking our provincial government to undertake a campaign to allow provinces to opt out of national programs, including national standards, without any financial consequences. And a no vote, the current Constitution remains, in which federal government has the responsibility to establish and enforce national standards. Is that fair? Any implications? Any need to learn? Next question. Okay. Do you support the Government of Alberta working with the governments of other willing provinces to amend the Canadian Constitution to better protect provincial rights from federal interference by giving a province's laws dealing with provincial or shared areas of constitutional jurisdiction priority over federal laws when the province's laws and federal laws conflict? And a yes vote means, I think, that we are asking our provincial government to undertake a campaign to weaken our federal system such that provincial legislation always has precedence over federal in all areas of overlap. And a no vote, we are asking our provincial government to respect the current Constitution. Anyone want to make any comment? I think Will's got a comment back there.
You know, it's nice to see Will participate. I remember when he was just a little kid in the front, so it's nice.
Oh, I see, and it's good to have a social studies teacher here too. That's very helpful.
Yeah, that's right. For this one, my main question is, like, what's the line of what laws would the province then have, precedence over the federal laws? Like if Alberta passed a new human rights law that went against the charter, would that human rights law now beat the charter? And so if Alberta, like based on the wording,
yes.
it would.
Yes.
So
to me, this is a separation question without the separation.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
If I may add, right now we have the federal government not enforcing the healthcare requirements. We've got privatization about to take place. We've had our provincial government has already overridden charter rights and used the notwithstanding clause. So the idea that they would have absolutely no resistance to that is really what they're looking for. So
yes, I mean essentially this means there's no need for the notwithstanding clause. Province can do what it wants. Okay, any other comments? Anything we need to learn? Nope, one more.
As parents of very transient young people, we are a very transient society. And so to think that Alberta has a hold on federalism is, yeah, it just seems very strange.
Okay, those are the 9 questions. And that leaves the 10th now, the separation question, which is on the last page. Should Alberta remain a province of Canada, or should the government of Alberta commence the legal process required under the Canadian Constitution to hold a binding provincial referendum on whether or not Alberta should separate from Canada? Okay, so presumably it's not a yes or no, it's a remain. The current conditions are maintained. Alberta remains a province within Canada. And commence the legal process. This asks the provincial government to hold another referendum on separation. And to note, no province has the unilateral right to secede from Canada. So binding referendum to secede, if passed, becomes the beginning of a very complex negotiation process between Canada, Alberta, the other provinces, and the First Nations. So it's a binding referendum isn't actually binding, it just begins a process of negotiation.
It's what Will said, the 50-70, where we need 50% of the provinces with 70% of the population. Other way around? 7 provinces with 50%. Okay. So that's would then become a negotiation of a negotiation.
But it's even more complicated than that, because there are First Nations and treaties and international, and yeah, it's a so Will in the back.
Thanks, Will. I'm getting old.
The other thing if you're doing more reading on like how these referendums could look and what the process would end up looking like, after Quebec had, I think it was their second referendum vote on this, Canada passed the Clarity Act, which kind of gave a bit more rules around how provinces can separate and what that actually looks like. So needs some homework. The Clarity Act gives a little bit more about the process, but again, it's all very unclear what it would actually look like.
You can probably talk to, if you know people who were in Quebec when the PQ government was first elected, and when the separation issue really became live. You can talk to people who were in Quebec at that time to find out kind of what happens in a province when that kind of process gets initiated. So someone back there has got a mic. Oh, go ahead, Don.
Yeah. Are we learning anything here? And are we going to remember anything here that we were talking about? I find this pretty complicated, right straight through. And if it means that we have to understand these 9 questions here when we go and vote, what about the average person, like, that's not here at a meeting, or student, or whatever the case might be, elders who don't understand this? How are these people going to be able to help us, protect this here province from being separated? Now, Daniel Smith, she was the first one who thought it was a great idea to bring in immigrants, and I think that's a great thing. But at the same time, she turns around she complains about the deficit that has been driven up because of the immigrants. This is just how she works, and now she's kind of dug herself into a deep hole trying to get herself out of this here mess. I would... we talk about treaties. Our first treaty was actually made back in the 1700s that was legally and bound. And then we went to the British. The British, had written, the treaty laws too here with Canada. Now the people that are separating, they have to deal with that. And not only that, also with the Alberta elders and chiefs, that the treaties here today has still not been acknowledged, and they're still fighting for it. I don't know where these separators are going to go to be able to finance and what they want to do. So this is where I find this whole thing, personally myself, quite complicated. I was here whenever Dwayne was here on the meeting about this here, and there was a lady that was up at the front, and she seemed to be in the legal business in the city here in an office, and she found that some of these questions quite difficult to answer herself. So where do we stand here in order to how to make a proper decision?
I think that's a question we're unfortunately not going to have time to address today because we're kind of at the limit for today. But I think that's a good what is going to be our strategy as a congregation in working with these referendum questions. I think that's an important thing for us to think about. So one more back there.
Dave, you had a question about when the day Quebec had that big vote. Well, I was in Montreal at the time, and I watched Brinks trucks arriving in Montreal from Quebec, from all corners of the province, driving all the money in that province to America and parking on the American side of the border at idle, because the province of Quebec was, everything was going to fall in Quebec when that happened. So, and people didn't talk about that. I seen it. It was there. The people did that. The economy left Quebec. And we noticed that. And furthermore, I'd like to ask you, I'd like to say something, is that everything we're discussing today, if I was to educate myself, I'd probably be 90 years old and still studying and still not understanding because it's so complicated. Everything, the wording, the way things are, the way they're put on paper, you just, like everybody's just sitting, like they're saying, what? And I'm the what guy here.
Thank you. I'm going to, looks like Chris has got something to say here, so I'm going to pass it off to Chris, and then we'll probably wind it up here.
Well, thanks everyone. And before I get into kind of what I would encourage your congregation to do, I am quickly needing to become a nerd on all of these things. And so I welcome the feedback from folks about the complexity of the questions themselves. And I learned something recently that I just want to share. There's something called the Flesch-Kincaid scale, which is a metric that we use to assess how readable any piece of text is. And which is I'm not making this up. This is a thing university linguists have put together. And someone on the West of Center podcast, which is a CBC podcast about Alberta politics, plugged all of the questions into an algorithm, into a computer that basically spat out an answer that said the questions in their entirety, based on the number of syllables, the types of words that are used, the punctuation would suggest that you would need at least a 4-year college education or higher in order to understand the questions before making a comment on them. Now, to be absolutely clear, if you don't understand these questions, you're not dumb. But I would suggest that if someone is making you feel dumb, I would question those motivations. It might be that there's an attempt to mislead or get the outcomes that a certain party would desire. So I'll just leave that with you. So I'll reintroduce myself again. So my name is Chris Moppo. I use the pronouns he, him, and his. I work for Chinook Winds, which is the region of the United Church of Canada, basically between Ponoka to the border with the United States, about 90 communities of faith. As Dave mentioned, I work in 2 different roles, one on children, youth, young adults, camps, and campus ministries, and the other on justice and networks. And to preempt your question, no, I don't sleep or have time for anything at all. The referendum and the church's response to the referendum are basically going to be my whole summer, so thank you for that. But I think it's of vital importance that the church get involved, and I really appreciate that David and your leadership team here started with just reading the questions out loud in a public space. I think that just having the opportunity to unpack them in community, have some conversations with your neighbors is an excellent place to start. So well done and thank you. So in addition to doing these sort of civic academy type things, what I'm encouraging people to do is, one, more of them. So I'll give you an example of what a congregation in Calgary is doing. Every 4th Thursday, Scarborough United Church is going to be hosting basically this. Coffee conversation around the referendum questions to anybody who would like to attend. You guys have fantastic numbers today. At Scarborough, we were able to turn out about 20 people from the neighborhood and off the street in some of our fellow conversations. And we're going through the referendum questions 2 by 2 between now and October. So that's one example of a way that your congregation might engage on this. Another thing that I'm encouraging people to do is engage in the practice of storytelling. And I heard it already in the crowd here today. So people talking about their experiences of the Quebec referendum, people talking about their experiences of immigration or working with refugees. And I'm glad that somebody also brought up the facts and figures. So I am going to try to find some facts and figures for you about some of the ways in which there's a financial impact around immigration. Those are important. But it's been my experience that in these types of moments in our society, things tend to get heated and facts and figures go out the window because we're focusing first on our feelings. That's okay, so long as we're able to engage someone, honor where they are, respect their points of view, and share ours. And I would suggest that a great way to have civic conversations with people is to engage in that practice of storytelling. So for those of you who were able to see the brief presentation that I offered earlier this week on this, the story that I'll be telling is the story of my grandfather, who despite being born in Ponoka, and despite his family coming to Canada legally, was required to register with the federal government in order to get a form of identification specific only to his race of people in Canada. He was born in 1924 not 1924, he was born just around the turn of the century in Ponoka, but despite the fact that he was by every metric Canadian, his family paid taxes, he would as well. He wouldn't get the right to citizenship until after he fought in World War II in 1947. The reason that I'm going to be telling that story is that denying people basic rights is a dark part of Canada's past. We see it in the Chinese Exclusion Act, we see it in the Chinese immigration documents, we see it in the Japanese-Canadian internment, we see it in all kinds of ways. Folks from Eastern Europe, particularly from Ukraine and Russia, were denied basic acts of citizenship. We see it in anti-Semitism. I could go on. The point that I'm trying to make is it is a dark part of our past. I really hope it's not a part of our future as well. So that's the storytelling I'll be bringing to the table, and I've already heard some great examples in which folks will be able to engage their neighbors on these issues through the act of storytelling. Maybe I'll leave it there for questions. Dave and I are going to be working with other members of the Chinook Winds executive to create basically a conversation guide. You're using one of our versions of that, so I'd strongly encourage you to think about ways in which your congregations can use that document to move forward in your conversations. Oh, that was the other thing. I would strongly encourage you as a congregation now, and I know that Dave is going on a well-earned sabbatical, so this is some homework for you while he's away, to start to think about your congregation's vote plan. What I mean by that is not a vote pledge. Dave would never say that the congregation must vote a certain way on any particular issue. We're going to offer our perspectives and the way that we feel called the church needs to respond. That's perfectly reasonable. But we would never, ever say, write down your name, that you intend to vote, and this is how you'll intend to vote. What I mean is, how is your congregation going to support its members and people in the congregation turning out to the polls? Dave mentioned that the election's on a Monday. If you're like me, that's a working day, so you'll need to take some time off work. If you have a child in the Calgary Board of Education system, the Calgary Catholic system, the Edmonton Board of Education system, the Edmonton Catholic system, that is a non-instruction day, so you will also need childcare. So it might be worth considering in your local context how your congregation can assist people who might have barriers to voting on how they can get to the polls. Folks that have mobility issues, folks that don't have a car, folks that might need to take time off work or need childcare. Those are ways in which we can show up as community in order so people can express their democratic will and not feel like there's a burden on them to express their way one way or another. I don't know about how things kind of played in the last municipal election out here in Lacombe, but in Calgary, the lines were hours long. So even something really basic like St. Andrews is going to provide bottled water or chairs, might just reduce that barrier to somebody's ability to access the polls. So it might be worth considering if your congregation wants to say, hey, are you interested in voting? How are you planning to get there? Do you want a reminder? Do you know where your polling place is? Those are real concrete ways in which your community of faith can support the democratic process. So maybe I'll just leave it there for questions for now.
I just wanted to mention that there's 5 days of advance polls from October 13th to the 17th. So right after Thanksgiving, that whole week will be devoted to advance polls. And it's going to take time to vote.
Yes.
It's not going to take 30 seconds. And there'll be 10 different colored ballots. It will take time, so everyone should vote early.
Thank you for that, yes.
Does.
Yes, so there, like other elections, there will be, my understanding is that there will be mail-in voting and the advance polling, but it hasn't been made clear from the provincial government what a mail-in ballot would look like, because as someone rightfully pointed out, we're talking about 10 different ballot papers, not one piece of paper. So, good questions though. Yeah, so my understanding is
just
that...
repeat the question. Bob, you said, is there any scrutineering that's going to be taking part of this?
Yes, there are going to be scrutineers from different parties. My understanding is that it would be really great if there was a system that was widely trusted that could, tabulate these things quickly, but we have a provincial law that prevents that. So all of these votes will need to be counted by hand, and my understanding is, yes, there are scrutineers. But going back to the kind of question about some of the process parts of this, I believe that the province is still in the process of hiring at least 3 times the amount of election workers that were required for our last provincial election. So there will be scrutineers, yes. I'm not sure whether your congregation can get involved in that, but I'll take that question back and get an answer for you. Yeah, let's call time. Thank you.
Thank you both for being here and walking us through these questions, by the way. It's really nice of you to do that.
And thanks to all of you very much for your interest in being part of this. Just to say it again, I think I've said it before, the reason we're doing this is because, at least at the regional level, I sit on the executive, we're dealing with this because we think that there's a fundamental breach of our religious values that is at work here. So we think that this one is a very important one for us to be involved with for spiritual, religious, ethical reasons. And that's why we're leaning on this one, and that's why we're going to be doing a kind of a campaign as a church. So I know a couple of people asked me about that before the service, and that's why we're taking this time. So one last one, and
I want to say this outside of everything, that I'm aware now people working in the hole in the area, immigrants on visas and everything, that the government has sent them home, and they were working full-time, 40, 50 hours a week, and they're taking them out of their jobs, sending them home, and hoping that we go back and fill in their jobs. Well, they're not, because, I don't know, they don't want to work for minimum wage. They want big salaries to wash pots, to serve people, to take tables, to serve coffee. And people working at the coffee shops and everything, when they're 4 or 5 of a family making $15 an hour, so you add 5 people or 4 people living in the same apartment, that's $60 an hour. And they're working full weeks, and they're going home to survive. And then you bought a car, they gotta buy food, they gotta buy clothes, they're spending their money here. We're complaining about the economy. Well, they're part of the economy. Thank you.
thank you. We will, I hope, have a chance to talk about how we approach this as a congregation. I only have a week left. If you're interested in this, come and talk to me in the next week, and we'll see if we can get a group together to organize. Thanks for lunch.